Welcome to Women's Sports Weekly, where women's sports happens every day, but we talk about it once a week. Women's Sports Weekly is a podcast where we discuss the latest news, explore interesting stories, and share our love for women's sports. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Women's Sports Weekly Pod. Follow us and rate us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Carolyn here again. We miss you all so much. I am here again by myself. If I were to guess what Danielle is doing in this moment, I would say that she's probably out for a long run. There's a high probability she's out for a long run. I am coming to you from the past, and you, the listeners, already know the winner of the 2024 WNBA Finals. This is so trippy. I'm feeling very meta right now. We will be back with you in the present next week, and we cannot wait to catch up. On this week's episode, we have an interview with Doshia Woods, the head coach of the University of Denver women's basketball program. Just one side note on this episode, this week's episode is not on video because we had some technical difficulties. Totally my fault. Thank you for bearing with us as we learn how to do audio and video at the same time. But back to Coach Woods. Her story is really inspiring, from how she grew up in East Topeka, Kansas, to now having over 20 years of coaching experience. She shared lessons learned as a head coach, how she takes care of herself and her team, and how she is a great example of practicing what you preach. Let's get into it. Doshia Woods is the head coach of the University of Denver women's basketball team, a Division I program part of the Summit League. She grew up in Topeka, Kansas, and played college basketball at Barton Community College, and later accepted a scholarship to play at Western Illinois University. After her college playing career, she stepped into coaching at Western Illinois University as an assistant coach, and then coached at programs including New Mexico State, Oregon State, and University of Missouri. She spent 10 seasons on the Tulane's women's basketball coaching staff before moving to take the head coach position at the University of Denver. This is her 5th season with the University of Denver. Back in episode 5, we talked about coaches we love, and we are so excited to have Coach Woods here on Women's Sports Weekly. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the intro. It seems like I've been doing this forever, in all those places.
Can you tell us about yourself, where you grew up, how you got into sports, when you decided to be a coach? Can you just give us a rundown of how you got here into coaching?
Absolutely. You mentioned I grew up in Topeka, Kansas, and I like to specify East Topeka, Kansas, just because it's like that side of the tracks. And as much as I can, just representing that side, because a lot of us didn't come from much. I was raised by a single mom, a brother and a sister. So basketball and sports in general was just like a way to stay busy, to stay active, to stay distracted, just from what was going on around us. I didn't play any organized sports until the 7th grade. Back then, because I'm old, I'm like 45, so
that is not old.
Actually, well, I'm older, because you know how this generation, I'm older. We could play outside when you could just be running around till the lights came on. It didn't matter. But in 7th grade, that's when I learned there was like this whole other side to Topeka, and there was Washburn University, which was a Division II, and they hosted this kind of sports camps for low-income kids. A lot of their basketball players and football players worked at camp. And so one time I was talking, she was like, you could do this in college. And really that first sparked me in terms of being able to get out of the environment that I was in. So fast forward, I played everything in high school: volleyball, basketball, track, and softball. But it was really the coaches who took some time to be patient with me. Again, coming from a lot, it was just practice was a way to have a 2-3 hour distraction from what was going on at home. And I actually had a love of English first. I have a degree in English and a minor in psychology, but having on creative writing. And I thought, I'm just going to coach and teach junior English. And then once I fell in love with the game, it was just the basketball court became the way that I figured I could teach. And really, every day I just try to work hard as a thank you to those who believed in me. And that was coaches from softball to basketball. I feel so blessed what the game has done for me. And now to be in this position where I can help other players and athletes and their dreams come true, and coaches too. Just been able to be in that position to help them get started. So basketball and sport has always meant a lot to me, and probably too much at times, but it's really been my savior in so many ways that I can't even tell you how many poems I've written about it. But I'm really fortunate to be in this role and be in this position. So I would say sports has a way of bringing us all together in a lot of different ways, and we all gravitate towards it for different reasons. And for me, it literally saved my life and it's given me a chance to dream dreams I never thought were possible. Growing up with a single mom on welfare, Section 8, honestly, my first goal was just to graduate high school and hope that happened. And now here I am with 3 degrees later, and it's basketball to thank for that.
We talk about that a lot on the podcast, just how sports are so much more than what they seem to be for a lot of people. And I think it's so important. And you mentioned you played quite a few sports in high school, which is awesome. How did you know you wanted to stick with basketball and take that to your collegiate career? And you already said you wanted to coach because that was your form of teaching and mentoring people. But how did you know you wanted to stick with that to play in college?
I would tell you it was 8th grade in Washburn, the Lady Blues. They were undefeated that year and they lost to Michigan Tech somebody. And at the time, it's funny, this is my 24th season overall, but my 5th as a head coach. And to think now how much I was around their locker room as like an 8th, 9th grader, just like places I really shouldn't have been, but I'll never forget the locker room. And they were so upset. Now, I sat in ton of practices, watch all these games. And I'm still, I wouldn't say devastated, but like it was still such a heartbreaking loss. And the way that they reacted in the locker room after, to watch them work so hard and pour so much into it and to show that kind of emotion and to be devastated and like everybody be okay with the tears and the disappointment. And then in 1996, that Olympic team, Coach Mary Washington was the first Black assistant coach for USA Basketball who coached at University of Kansas. And they did this 40-game college tour. And fun fact, that was the only practice I got kicked out of in high school. And I remember my high school coach at the time, she also coached softball. Coach Solina, shout out to her, but we both were hotheads. And so I remember I got kicked out and all I could think is, I still have to be able to go to this exhibition game because we'd been talking about it for like last 2 weeks. And so I'm like, I don't care how many suicides I have to run, like I will be on the bus. And it was a big learning lesson for me. Never happened again. I still got to make that trip. But really that 96 team in all still been around basketball as long as I have. I would say that 96 team and really Washburn, the way that the players at Washburn took me in, when I think about it now, I'm at pregame with them. I'm hanging out at their houses. Like they let the little ball girl just come everywhere. Like I was on the team. I think for me, it was just really a way that I had a chance to be around it and to see the relationships and how much they grew as people just being on a team. And I wanted that for myself.
It's so interesting how something so young can make such a huge impact, and that could go either way, right? Like could have been a negative experience that could have deterred you, but having that positive experience where you're able to be the ball girl and then they're inviting you in and you're able to see the entire, like the good and the bad. That's just so great. Why did you get kicked out of practice? That's what I want to know.
You know, honestly, I was such a hothead. Our high school gym is called The Dungeon. Topeka High School is the first $1 million high school built on the west side of Mississippi. So it's this historic building, but the bleachers are like endless. And so I was always one of those players, if we all are teammates and you keep making the same mistake in practice, sub out of practice, because I'm not going to keep running for you doing the same thing. And I'm supposed to be on the baseline when the buzzer goes off. And I just didn't feel like it because if this was a game, like you'd sub this person out. I wasn't there. She said a few choice words. I said a few choice words back. And I knew it was wrong, but it was like I was trying to prove my point and she proved her point and sent me home. I was like, good God. And I think I've always been one of those leaders, if you will. And so it was more embarrassing than anything because it's one thing like playing hard, but I've always prided myself on not being disrespectful. And that day I was, but she was more like a second mom to me. We are still super close to this day. My time here at Denver, our Summer League tournaments in South Dakota, and she drove up last year, hasn't missed a game in Kansas City. And our high school teammates tease us about it all the time. And now it's funny when we talk about our current team here, I see the same relationship I have with one of our players. And so it's just comical. Now it's funny. It wasn't funny then. Now it's funny.
And I feel like to so many young kids, and I know this for me, especially, like I was begging for structure. I was begging for someone to help me in whatever ways. And even though I might have pushed back in it, when I'm able to look back now, I'm like, yeah, that's what I needed. I needed that. I needed that structure. I needed to be parented because that's what every child needs. And you're working with kids at the end of the day.
Yes. Yeah, because they're not fully developed, though they think they are. But this is the reason why I enjoy coaching this demographic is that last step before adulthood to see players come in and obviously spending 18 years with their parents or guardians, and then they come in and start to figure out who they are and to watch that process is just so fun to me because they start to have thoughts of their own. As I told them, this is that like double Dutch time. You can be a kid one day and act like, oh, I'm so growing up. And then the next moment you want to be grown. You're not really grown. If your parents are still still paying for anything, or you have to answer to them. And I think to your point, there is a element of like tough love and structure that they really want. It's going to come with some resistance. And frankly, that's something that I had to learn in becoming a head coach. It's fun being an assistant. For 19 years, you're that like, almost like the fun auntie, right? And they come and tell you all these things. And knowing what I know now, entering my 5th year, I really struggled with that the first few years here, is trying to find that balance. I didn't realize how much they paid attention to everything I did as a head coach. Just saying hey to Carolyn early, because we're both in the gym early, but now Danielle's upset because she's reading something into it. That was hard for me to navigate, just because as an assistant, you have your positions and you have people that you're close to, but really trying to balance that out. And I feel like I have a much better grip on it. But this first few years, looking back on it, is definitely an area I struggled in, providing that tough love with structure.
I want to go back a little bit to you as an assistant. I played college basketball at the Division III level, and then I was a graduate assistant
and you were an English major.
Yeah, a lot of similarities.
Oh, yes. I love it.
But I was a graduate assistant for 3 years at the school I played at. And one of the things I noticed from going to player to coach is, as a player, when the season ends, it kind of ends, right? Of course, you have your out of season plans that you have to follow, this and that. But as a coach, it never really ends, because right when the season starts, you have to go right to recruiting. It's just this full cycle that people who aren't involved in it don't ever see that part. They're like, oh, the season's over, so now what do? You go on vacation? It's like, no, I'm already attracting that next line. I'm curious, from being an assistant to also turning into a head coach, how have you handled recruiting over the years? How does that affect your personal life with travel all the time? I'm just curious to hear your perspective on that and how you continue to do it year over year.
Oh, that is saying a mouthful. What's crazy, because 19 years as an assistant, of those 19 years, I think 15 of them I was recruiting coordinator.
Wow.
I was a lot younger. I was recruiting coordinator at both Tulane, University of Missouri, and Oregon State. It was funny because I really enjoyed traveling then. It was like, I couldn't wait to, when I was at Oregon State, I handled Seattle and San Diego and LA quite a bit, a little in the Bay Area. So it was cool being like a Kansas girl, and I get to see somewhere different. So it was fun then. I think what has changed is the game has changed more in these 4 years that I've been at DU than it has the previous 19 years. So recruiting isn't what it used to be. For context, one of my, you're not supposed to have favorites, but one of my former players is the GM for Seattle Storm. Talisa Rea is awesome. GM for there. And my time at Oregon State, this is how recruiting was then. She was from Juneau, Alaska. Never really ate salmon before, but you'd go to a home visit and her mom had like salmon, everything. You spent some time there. That was one visit. Another visit, this is back in the day where I'm recruiting her. What's your favorite class? And now I'm a grown ass woman sitting in this class, because that's how recruiting was then. It's like you got a chance to really foster relationships. She's actually one player that the month of August, I wrote her a letter every day. Every day I wrote her a letter, something different. And it was like a cool way just to build a relationship. We're still close to this day. I know Seattle's playing anywhere, and if I got the time and energy, I'm going. That's how it was then. You fast forward to now, this past spring, we had 5 kids go in the portal. So we signed 5 kids out of the portal. So honestly, it would be something I would take personal. And I think now there's so many different variables that all like I can do and my staff, all we can do is what we talk about is just doing our best. Yep. And I think you're, as much as you want to try to make everybody happy, you can't. That was hard for me because I don't want to be the source of your sadness, right? I don't want to be the source, but also, I mean, where you're watching WNBA games and I've been looking at the box scores, other than Vegas, who played 10 people, most people are playing 7 people, maybe 8 on the high end. And that's such a hard concept. But I say all that to say, in recruiting, the 5 kids that we lost in the portal, we signed 5 kids. 4 of them we met for the first time when they came on campus. Wow. It was just Zoom. It was like speed dating. One particular kid, it was May. I said, let's be honest. The portal opens in March, right? So your season's over. Portal opens and you have this 45-day window. And it's May. We struck out on some kids. And I said, let's be honest. You didn't find what you're looking for. Neither did we. Let's make something shake. And you got 48 hours and we got somebody else lined up. So unfortunately, it's become super transactional. One area that I'll do differently this spring, because it about broke my staff. You would expect a couple. We had some graduate as well as that number of 5, but we had some underclassmen. This year, not anticipating losing anyone, but we will take 2 weeks off. And instead of trying to dive heavy into that portal window, if you call us, we'll follow up. But we're not spinning our wheels, because the reality is we're at the University of Denver, and let's just use the state of Colorado. If we're at the University of Denver, if we call you, Colorado State calls you, and Colorado calls you, we could do all the work, but as soon as one of them called, you're gonna be like, okay.
Yeah.
This sounds better, though we might be a better fit. No sense of us wasting our time and energy when you're waiting for something bigger. Like, we know who we are. We know what we have to offer. And I think that changing our approach now, we have 8 new players, 3 of them are freshmen, 5 out of portal. Really like the team that we've been able to put together, but it's definitely challenging because I don't like the transactional piece of it. I've always, when I got the job, put it this way, is my 10 years at Tulane, we had 1 transfer.
Wow.
We had 1 transfer who, again, you talk about relationships. She actually has a clothing company now that I bought a couple pairs of her shorts. So it wasn't anything bad. But now I had 5 last year.
Yeah.
And I felt like, okay, well, if 2 of you are freshmen, like, give it a chance to work. So it's so many variables now that both for the athletes and the kids, it's social media taints so much for all of us that I just try to live moment to moment. And at the end, I did a lot of self-reflecting. Last season was hard in so many ways. It's been refreshing the players that are their 3rd, 4th, or 5th year in our program now to be able to acknowledge just the changes that we have made as a staff, because you want to try to get it right and we don't get it right all the time. And that's what I struggled with the first 3 years.
Yeah. It's so difficult because I feel like when I was in college, I would go for the shiniest thing, right? What could get me to that next spot? And now as I've gotten older, I'm like, no, where you feel most at home, where you feel most comfortable is the place that I want to be. But I don't know if I would have known that in college. That takes some learning, and maybe parents are able to start that earlier, but there was that piece in me, like, I must get the next thing. I must get the next shiny new thing, even if it meant that the culture was bad, even if it meant that I wasn't gelling well with the teammates around me. And now I've learned where you feel most comfortable, where it feels like home, where you feel like you could build something is actually the place you need to be, even if it's not the shiniest. I just can't imagine. That must be really difficult.
And like I tell our players, be realistic about your goals. I saw this really good Instagram reel. It's like, Division 3 is your part-time job. This is how the person was explaining it. Is your part-time job. You like basketball, but you get to have a summer. You still get to have a life. Division 2 is like that part-time job with benefits, right? They don't have summer access. They have to have a week off at Christmas. And then Division 1 is like this full-time job with benefits, with perks, with bonuses, all of these things. And I really wish athletes and their parents or people supporting them will just be honest about the different levels. And I say there's different levels for different reasons. Everybody has different expectations. We had a player, one of our kids last year, transferred Division 3. And I think that was she wanted to balance that Division 3 allows. And so for her, that was important. So I wish people would know that on the front end, because I think sometimes they come to this level thinking it's going to be glorified PE, but we're going to be out here just field day and everybody gets some type of ribbon. No, you don't. You don't. Everybody doesn't get a ribbon. And I'm glad this is an Olympic year, because what I've been using with our team is watching the Olympics, let's say track and field or swimming, and you'll see some athlete from a country straining in the 200 for a personal best, country best, and still not medal. That doesn't mean they didn't work hard. That doesn't mean they didn't try. They did their best, and somebody was just better. Been able to try to just use those analogies, because you get 15 athletes that are all wanting the same thing, and you guys could all be working hard. Somebody's just better. And I told the team, you can call me Coach Claire. This is my clarity season. I used to be super sarcastic, and I've tried to minimize that because it didn't land the way that it was supposed to. So now I'm just like, get straight to the point. And they're like, wait, is that what you meant? I'm like, yeah, you guys wanted clarity. Here it is. Not everybody's going to play. And it's such a challenging part. And I think if people can get back to the phrase of trusting the process, just because it is a process and it's such a learning curve once you come in, that if you can stick it out, it really has a lot of just life lessons and personal growth that it can provide. But it takes some time to get there.
And along those lines, you had mentioned not everyone's going to play. And at all levels, it's like that. You're going to have kids who come in and work their butts off day in and day out, and unfortunately not see the floor because they're not at the same levels. I think one of the important things is culture, right? Because you need to create a culture and an environment that you have those kids stay, because they're just as important as your number one. It's just their role looks a little different. So how do you create a culture on your team that keeps people showing up, keeps energy levels high, and keeps people's attitudes at bay? And of course, it's not going to be perfect every day, but just curious to hear more about that.
That was the area I struggled in. And honestly, that's the reason why we had 5 kids in the portal. I like our culture. I like what we're building. One area that I fell short last year is I didn't let those players know how important they were, right? Just because you're not on the top team or you didn't play, I didn't do a good job of managing those relationships throughout the year. And saying that, I used to pride myself on, I don't want there to be any guessing, right? If you're one of my athletes, I don't want you to guess. If you're not playing, I want you to know why.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean you have to like it. You have to accept it. And a lot of that was blurred last year that was not understood. I thought I was communicating, but what I think I'm communicating and what you think you hear are two different things. Our core values are progress, both the word and the acronym. And in the past, prior to this season, each of my assistants would split up the team and these 4 athletes for the whole year in your progress team. Mm-hmm. One of my assistants is out on maternity leave. And so now it's just 3 of us, me and 2 other assistants. And in the summer, I said, let's try it this way where we rotate every week or every 2 weeks, different kids. So you're not seeing the same kid. But what I also did different is put myself in the mix this time, right? Not just leave it to them, put myself in the mix. So it's really been good to build relationships that way, to have some one-on-one time. I would have some one-on-one times, but honestly, they were super surface. So one area that we've really tried to connect better is staff is required to get there 15, 20 minutes early. And shout out to our players, especially our leadership team. They set the culture this summer where you always want to be player-led, and our skill work, we had this unwritten rule, get there 10 minutes before practice. And we start in June and 15 minutes before practice, and everybody's literally already has a ball ready to work, ready to get drills in, to the point that in the past I'd had to put that in practice. We had to put skill work in practice because people weren't doing it. And now we get that extra 15 minutes to actually do 5-on-5 stuff because the captains have taken care of that. So it is taking some time to build that way. But I also think our culture this year, our leadership team, one's in her 5th year, the others are in their 3rd year, that we really have the relationship where they can be honest with me now too. My mom used to say this saying that if you got something to say with your chest, say it so I can hear it, or don't say shit at all. Mm-hmm. And sorry, can I cuss?
Yes, you can curse.
Okay. Or don't say shit at all. And I used to say that all the time. And now I'm like, you know what? My mom was definitely one who didn't mince words and just got straight to the point and didn't care if it was a gut punch, a head punch. And so I was like, maybe that's too harsh for word. But with the leadership team, I could just ask them for honesty. We had a situation a few weeks ago and I said, hey, did I handle it okay? Or what should I have done different? Because I know the mistakes that I made in the past. And they're able to be honest. What's the point of us building this relationship where we can't be transparent? Mm-hmm. So I really like to consider myself a player coach, but I also think the relationship is 2 ways, right? 2-way street. If both of you guys are on the team and Danielle's the one getting there early every day, staying late, that's extra time to kind of build a relationship, even if it is 10 minutes of shots. We're talking about your class or talking about whatever. And I think for the players to understand, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. And the relationship piece, whatever you want it to be, we're accessible for it. Yeah. And they're all different levels. But what I enjoy about our culture now is just how hard it's taken me to build it to what it is. I came in saying player-led and a lot of different things and missed the mark, not having a team that you necessarily recruited. So you're trying to guess personalities on the fly. So it's a lot of different areas. One of the most rewarding things is when people come and watch practice is the energy they comment on and just how we talk. I don't schedule a water break. I'm like, you need water, get water. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't schedule a water break in a game. We don't say you can only get water here as long as you can pay attention to get water. So it's one where we really try to give them a lot of ownership. So there's more buy-in. And this team, I can really say that this is the first time I felt like there's buy-in from them and there's patience for me, because I thought I was patient, but y'all, I was not. A lot of self-reflecting. And it's just like, girl, pump the brakes. I think there was times where I was either too lenient and then I let you do what you want for 2 months. And then all of a sudden I want to try to come in and hammer home something. Well, now I already done lost it because you've been used to something else for 2 months. Now I can't all of a sudden pivot like that and expect you to be excited about it. A lot of lessons, let's say that, a lot of lessons in 4 years.
I want to just say, like, every coach makes mistakes, right? And if they say that they don't, they're lying. And I would really, really love to play for a coach who is doing that self-reflection. Mm-hmm. I think Emma Hayes, right? She's the women's national team coach for soccer. She is so big on her own professional development, and that trickles down to all the other players because they know their coach is doing the work. I think there was this feeling that coaches could never be wrong and they have to just stick to their guns. And to hear you reflect about ways that you can improve, I think that's so amazing. If I was a college recruit right now and I was hearing you speak, I'd be like, I want to go play for someone like Coach Woods, who does her own reflection, might even say, hey, I messed this part up and I want to make it better. So thank you for sharing that piece. I think that's so important. I think it's so important for anyone to see, hey, I know when I make a mistake and I'm going to take responsibility and try to make it better.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for saying that. I appreciate it.
And one of the things I was thinking through is you talked about all the things you learned over these past few years of stepping into the head coaching role. And I think of it as a business in a kind of way, because they always say like a business doesn't start making money till 5 years. I really do think it's crossover, and you're stepping into your 5th year as head coach. And obviously you've already shared how you've grown as head coach and things you've taken. So just curious, going into year 5, what expectations do you have for yourself and the team, and how do you want to see things maybe go a little differently than they have in the past?
My Twitter profile, I have this pinned tweet that says, clap until it's your turn, right? It was like a book I listened to, and then it was like a podcast. Heather Thompson Day is a professor. Anyways, it was a clap until it's your turn. And that really resonated with me. And I pinned it there because I'm like, it's going to be our turn next season. We've done a lot of clapping for people. If you know anything about DU athletics, hugely successful athletics department, right? You name the sport, and it's virtually every sport with the exception of basketball, both men and women's basketball, haven't had the sustained type of success as the others. Men's soccer is ranked number 1 right now. Hockey is preseason number 1. And I've done a lot of just diving into those programs in terms of clapping for them, cheering for them. Men's and women's lacrosse, highly successful. So my expectations for year 5 is the foundations was laid so slowly, getting the role in the pandemic, where the first year and a half, it was no coaching in a sense of like any ideas I had were irrelevant, because we had, if you get swabbed 3 times a week, if we got to play the game, there was no one that tested positive. That was already a win. That was like a zombie coaching, because you work so hard just to get to the game day, and hopefully everybody is healthy. That COVID year, we played Friday, Saturday, same opponent back to back. We had some positive COVID tests, so we had to skip a week. And then we had another positive, but we had 6 healthy bodies. And we were trying to decide if we're going to play or not play. And I'm like, we're going to be out for another 4 weeks if we don't. And so we ended up playing that game, both of those games with 6 people. Won the first one, obviously ran out of legs like the second day, but it was a lot of lessons to learn. So I think going into year 5, I've had to have a lot of patience, a lot of just goals that I had for myself and for our team. I felt like were put on hold. A year after that is when I really started to recruit our type of players and be able to build around that. So that's what I'm excited about. Honestly, I'm a short-term goal type of person, and we talk often, let's just go 1-0. Want to know this game, want to know. And I think for starters, non-conference, just having a winning record going into conference play, I think our schedule is set up to do that, both to be challenged and to be pushed. And then let's regroup again once we get the conference, and then I'll circle back around with you guys then. But I really like this group, and I like the way that they've really have made it their team. I felt in the past it was my team, and I was trying to lead and kind of guess what they wanted. And now I feel like it's clear what they want, and it's going to be hard, but we have a group that's willing and ready to work for it to be hard and not doubt themselves on the hard days.
And you've talked a lot about ways that you take care of yourself, writing poems, taking time for yourself. Can you talk a little bit about the ways that you take care of yourself, both during season and outside of season?
Yes. My wife converted one of the rooms. Don't ask me why. We had like 4-bedroom house with 2 of us, and we have 2 dogs. We bought the house in COVID, so we're like, oh, let's just finish the basement. Now we got all this house, and for what? But anyway, she converted one of the rooms to my Zen space, is what she calls it, because I'll meditate, I'll go down and pray, but I also have a 2-person infrared sauna in there.
Ooh, nice.
That I'll just sit. So that's usually where I'll go to write and to meditate and really just try to do a lot of reflection. And then probably about 4 months ago, we joined Rumble Boxing Southlands, which is half boxing, half floor in terms of like weights. And that's been really fun to just join and build relationships with either the coaches or other members there. And it's just something that's so mindless, because I think when the season is going, you just get so caught up in watching film, preparing for this, preparing for that. Our team likes Sundays off, and because it's like a one day where they know they don't have school, they don't have practice. And so finally I was like, Sunday's off for them, but it's really off for me too, that at least half the day I can do that. I really try to just get some alone time to just breathe. I didn't realize as a head coach, all the decisions you have to make for everything, whether it's something with your team, something about your staff. I'm on a couple of committees, and like my wife would get mad because I'm not deciding what we eat. I'm not picky. As long as it's not eggplant, I really don't care. Like eggplant, I don't know why I crush eggplant like that, but eggplant is like literally the one thing that I can't eat. But other than that, it doesn't matter. But every year I've kept a journal of the season. hard times, fun times, and then to go back. And last season was the most difficult. And I went back, read that journal and then the previous years. And that's where I was like, it's easy to point the fingers, but then that's when I was like, okay, I definitely changed here, or I've done this differently. It's twofold. It's for me to gather my thoughts, but it's also to just track my own growth and what I thought then and how I either grown or how things needed to pivot. But I'm a big writer. I write in my journal. I have a folder on my phone for notes that I think I have like 180 poems on there that I'm just, this person said that, let me start it now. I would say if there's 150, probably 130 of them are done.
Wow.
The rest of them are just like a phrase that I heard or something. But yeah, writing, I'd say basketball saved my life, but really when I write, I feel right.
Wow. Do you post your poems anywhere? Can we read them? Are they on Twitter?
Yes, sometimes I'll post on Twitter, sometimes I'll post on Instagram. And I've tried to be better posting. My best friend moved here a few years ago, and we used to do these like FaceTime coffees, but now we can do it in person.
So nice.
We went to high school together, so I'll often send her a poem and she'll be like, you really need to start posting these. So I was like, I'll try one that's just like not overly emotional, because most of them personal, but some of them are also just like my experience with someone that I just needed to write about it because it just makes me feel better. But yeah, I'll have to send you guys some, but I've been better about posting.
Would love to see them, and definitely going to make sure that we're on the lookout for those on your Instagram and your socials. So you mentioned your wife, Lindsay Wernz. She is the associate head coach for the basketball team. And I know some really successful programs that have had a couple as coaches on the team. I know that they can be really great for the team, especially for young women who are leaving home for the first time. It feels more like a family when they're coming into a coaching staff where two of the coaches are together. So I know how it can be beneficial for the players, but how do you take care of your relationship? Danielle and I are married. I feel like if we were coaching, I don't know how we would leave the coaching in the coaching and be able to take it home. So do you have any rules for yourself? How do you take care of your relationship?
We've been together 16 years. We've been married 13 years.
Wow.
And the new role for both of us, her being my associate head, me being a head coach, almost did us in, to be honest with you. I don't think we were quite prepared for the new responsibility that we were going to have, right? And it's one thing when we're both in assistant positions or support role positions where you're making decisions, but you're really not. Yeah. And so now to be in this role where I keep mentioning last season how hard it was, both of us were super sick at 2 different times. Mm-hmm. And whether it's like urgent care, and it was just like the stress had just built up because I'm showing up every day trying to do my best and it's not good enough. You're trying to pivot, all of these things. And so after the season, part of the self-reflection, like we need to figure this out or we can't do this together, right? I love basketball, but not more than the life that we've built. I think one area that we both really got back to is we really enjoy like joining Rumble, and we have always had this kind of like space outside of basketball. When we were in New Orleans, it was like a different gym, but the same concept. And so we were like, I don't care how much it costs, we need to join the gym. And we really started to be super intentional about our time together, how tired we were. Something as simple as on Tuesdays we're playing rummy, and she has like a whole scoreboard. She's kicking my butt right now, but she has like the whole scoreboard where it's like, we're going to play rummy and we can't talk basketball. Yeah. We started watching Hallmark and Lifetime, just like stupid rom-coms, because we had to find something mindless to try to find the balance. We did this personality test, the team and the staff. It was the DISC test, right? The DISC. And it's like if the I's and C's are like super opposite, they struggle communicating. Well, she's a C and I'm an I. So the girls are all looking at us like, okay, how does that work? And so the facilitator's like, well, how does it work? And I said, honestly, I think we've done a good job of understanding each other. She's super analytical. She's the one on the staff that will break down the numbers and tell you the shots. If you really want the hard kind of film, go talk to her. If you want to stay in the moment and a tough love, but we're going to talk about it, tough love, come to me. So our balance now is just being able to also give each other some space too when we get home. Okay, you going to the basement or I'm going to the basement just to regroup and breathe. And then the last part is trying to set aside time to talk about basketball. And if there's nothing to talk about, we don't always have to insert basketball in it. And then it has to be solution based. We can't be frustrated at work and then come home and keep venting and not have a solution. So I'm like, is this vent time or solution time? And you got to let me know before you start talking. But It's fun. I think what I enjoy about it is just both of us being around the game that we love. We both have completely different experiences when we play too. So for her to be able to offer that perspective, she transferred to about 3 different schools when she played. A lot of different reasons. Career was ended by multiple concussions, and for her to just have these like kind of two balancing perspectives. But I think for us, in terms of our players, as it comes to relationship, we just want to show what a healthy relationship is. They see us definitely not fight, but we disagree. And always come on the other side, just talking it out and then seeing us basically be in this competitive space, pushing each other, pushing them. It's been fun, and I would have probably still been doing it, but I'm just so blessed I had an opportunity to do it with her. And I would say huge shout out to DU. When I was offered the job, it was about a 4-week process. And when they finally offered the job, she never came up. We worked together at Tulane and it never came up. When they finally offered the job, they said, we support whoever you want to hire to build this program. And that includes your wife.
Wow.
And I was like,
that's great.
I was like, wait, and people are like researching, but for them to just set the tone, and it wasn't something that we honestly planned on. It was COVID. I wasn't going to have a full staff, and I was going to have to keep somebody that was already here. And so I like looked at her like, you got to work now because yeah, we can't go in there. And so it wasn't something that was honestly going to be permanent. But she's done a phenomenal job, and it's been a lot of fun.
It's really cool to hear you talk about that. And it is really important for the young women on your team to see a good relationship. I know that I've talked about it numerous times. It's had its effects on our relationship where I was like, I haven't seen a relationship that I like ever. And so for a lot of your young women to come in, it's likely that it's the case for at least some of them. So to see that, and then to also have the time where you carve out for yourselves to play rummy or to take care of yourselves and go to Rumble, I could imagine that hitting the shit out of something probably feels really good. I think that's
Facts.
really amazing.
Yes. No, it's one of those things where you just try to live each moment. You just try to like live and not realizing the impact until after. We had a former player last week actually come, played for us at Tulane, but she's back here visiting. And each practice we start at half court in the circle and we end in the circle. And so if you come visit, you have to introduce yourself, let us know who you are, where you're from. And there wasn't anything prompted. We just told her that she had to introduce herself. She can practice. So she introduces herself, and then she starts talking about us and just how much it meant to her in her career. And she graduated 8 years ago, but she still has family in the area, but it's also where her family is. She stayed here at the house. So for them to see that, we really just want their 4 years of college to be what they anticipated it being. And then the real fun starts when they're done playing, because 4 years is such a short amount of time when those relationships are formed. And it doesn't end just because your career ended.
One of the themes that keeps coming up throughout this conversation, and it makes sense, as a coach, you're a role model to so many people, a mentor, and it happens past a player's career, right? How have you used mentorship for yourself? How have you called on mentors in your life throughout your career, especially stepping into a head coach position? Because I think that's so helpful and important to have people to go to when you need to bounce ideas off. And just curious if there's been one person in particular or multiple people that you call on, and how has that affected your career?
No, I am definitely a whole village type person. To single out one person, I think Coach Stockton, who I worked for at Tulane for 10 years, it was really a pivotal time in my career because she allowed me to coach in a lot of different areas. Typically, when you're a young Black assistant, often you get pigeonholed and you're just going to be the recruiter. And for her, it was whatever you can handle, you can do. Recruiting was a huge part of that, but I had an opportunity to do scouts, to coach the guards, to develop guard workouts, and to be in charge of academics, to be in charge of financial aid, a lot of these different areas. So she's one that I would often call to. But what I've been able to do here is I have like my little circle, I call it. And my wife, obviously, she's in it and she can see different perspectives and really holds me accountable in different ways. Shimmy Miller, one of my good friends who was a longtime assistant, who is now a broadcaster, but she was also a head coach. And so she's one that I typically go to when I know I need a balance of both realness and grace, just being through it, herself being a head coach. And then I like also having non-basketball people, because sometimes it can get too basketball heavy. And that's where one of my really good friends, Kayla, works for the state of Kansas, the gaming commission, but she played basketball in college, so she pays attention. And then my sports supervisor at the time was Lynn Coots, but now she's actually the athletic director at UMass Lowell. It's like a balance of people. As my therapist would say, when you go to the mall, you're going to the stores for a specific thing. So you're not going to Starbucks looking for a pair of New Balance shoes, because that's not what Starbucks' role is. And that's how I have my inner circle set up. Is I know what I need. So it's a balance, but I would give Lisa Stockton a huge credit in terms of being a mentor in that role. And then a couple of my other college coaches, Coach Mitchell, Coach Crane, and then my high school coach. To sum me up, I'm just a sponge. If I spend time with you, I want to leave, and I'm always looking for a way to learn and grow. That's how I live my life. So it's hard to just single out one person because I feel like most people I interact, I'm trying to learn something that I want to try to implement or something I don't want to do.
Yeah. You can learn a lot of what's not working.
Yes.
So as we wrap up today, we want to ask you, who is your favorite athlete in women's sports?
Oh, ever. I would definitely say Serena Williams, but I would say Venus and Serena because Venus came first and then Serena came. And so it was like, I didn't know any of it existed in terms of seeing Black girls play tennis. So I would say Venus and Serena, but definitely Serena. Fun fact, we have a tradition or program, a big Halloween party. I'll have to send you guys posts. But I was Serena Williams one year and
I love that.
My wife was Billie Jean.
Oh my God. That's amazing.
That is so
and
great.
Then, we take Halloween to a whole nother level. Last year we were Madonna and Janet Jackson.
Amazing. Any insight on what's happening this year? Or is it a secret?
It's always a secret. And it's so funny because in the group thread with the team, we don't have a theme yet. Honestly, we don't know. And hopefully we can pull it off because it started with Orange is the New Black, right?
Yep.
So I was crazy eyed one year. She was hyper. Then after that, people started to expect this we've been a Hulk Hogan, Mr. T, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson.
This is great.
So if you guys have any suggestions, we're taking them for sure. But I would say definitely Serena Williams. And then honestly, after that, probably that whole 96 Olympic team.
Yeah.
I think they were just so incredible and a team before their time. And for as much basketball as I've watched and been around since then, I really don't know if anybody could still beat them to this day. You pick a team, it doesn't matter. So I'll say that whole team.
That's great. And then finally, where can we follow you? Where can we follow the Pios? Tell us everything.
Yes, both Pios. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, DU_W Hoops, where you can find and follow along with our team and all our fun shenanigans. We have some really great personalities that understand the balance, but when it's time to have fun, we're definitely having fun. But when it's time to work, we work. And I would say Instagram is probably where we spend a lot of that time, but all three platforms are all the same. And then I am Doshia Woods, both on Twitter and Instagram, mostly Twitter, but we'll say Instagram for the sake of followers. But yeah, definitely follow us. And then any interest in our games or our schedule, DenverPioneers.com. We have quite a few home games this year, which would be nice in terms of not having to travel all the time. And even one of our road trips, we have 3, but one of them is to Colorado up in Boulder. So that's just going to be a nice little bus ride. Yeah. Denver Pioneers, if anybody's interested, and just email me if you want tickets. We want to make this year, and part of our motivation for having so many home games was so people can get to know us and put us on your calendar and have it be a weekly, monthly, just kind of have an outing and come have a lot of fun.
Awesome. We're definitely going to be at some games this year. We can't wait to see you all there. Thank you so much for joining us, Coach Woods. We really appreciate it. That is it for this week. We will see you next week on Women's Sports Weekly. In the meantime, watch women's sports, rate and subscribe to the pod on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Share the podcast with your friends. Keep sending us topics you want us to cover on Instagram at Women's Sports Weekly Pod. Thanks so much.